All right, we do have breaking news. Presidential candidate Nikki Haley, she was asked last night,
what was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question, right?
This is why she's not ready for the big limelight against somebody like Donald Trump.
Clean up on aisle 12. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley doing damage control today. She also blamed the questioner, suggesting the person was a Democratic plant.
That war was fought for black people to have freedoms in this country. Yeah. Actually, that's why the Civil War was fought. Black people did not get to enjoy the other freedoms until their Second Amendment rights were secured. And I think that that's one of the lessons that we learned.
Aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. With due respect, Don, I look forward to continuing that conversation.
Thank you. The conversation.
Thank you.
Vivek gave Don Lemon the business. And you'll recall, they couldn't finish that conversation because Don Lemon got squeezed and his butt got sacked. Don should thank CNN for saving him from further embarrassment. Hey, welcome back to One and Done. Speaking of embarrassment, Nikki Haley, again, getting stumped on basic questions. Neocon Nikki claims that she has more political experience than our boy Vivek. However, how many times has Vivek shown that he can answer any question, no matter how difficult? Hey fam, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to hit the like, smash the subscribe button, and you'll definitely be helping this brother out. Without delay, let's jump in, roll the tape.
all right, we do have breaking news. Presidential candidate Nikki Haley is on the radio right now as we speak, doing a sort of cleanup following questions last night at a rally in New Hampshire. She was asked last night, what was the cause of the Civil War? What was the Civil War about? I want you to listen to her answer from last night and note what it does not include, which is any mention of slavery. Listen.
What was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Crickets.
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do.
Nikki. She handled that like an absolute chump. Now let's watch Vivek manhandle and bodybag Don Lemon when it comes to the Civil War and blacks' Second Amendment rights to be able to bear arms. I know it's slightly different, but this is one of my favorite clips.
Do you have anything on this before I move on to China?
I don't see what one has to do with the other, but go on. I took up a lot of time with Fox.
Oh, it's fine. We have time.
I don't really see what one has to do with the other, especially consider and using the Civil War to talk about black Americans. That war was not fought for black people to have guns. That's not.
That war was fought for black people to have freedoms in this country. Yeah. Actually, that's why the Civil War was fought.
Okay.
And the sad part about it.
That wasn't fought for black people to have guns. I think.
Actually, you know, funny fact is black people did not get to enjoy the other freedoms until their Second Amendment rights were secured. And I think that that's one of the lessons that we learned.
Aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. I disagree with you. I think you're doing a disservice to our country by failing to recognize the fact that we have equality before the law.
When you are in black skin and you live in this country, then you can disagree with me. But we're not. You mentioned in here that we have three different shades of melanin. Don, I think we have to be able to talk about these issues in the open regardless of the color of our skin. Black Americans today, to say that, compare that to 1865 and 1964, I think for you to compare it to 1865 and 1964
is actually,
I think it's insulting to black people. It's insulting to me as an African American. I don't want to sit here and argue with you because it's infuriating for you to put those things together. It's not right. Your telling of history is wrong.
What part of the history was wrong? What part of the history was wrong?
That the Civil War was fought. You're making people think that the Civil War was fought for black people, only for black people to get guns and for black people to have.
The Civil War was fought for black people in this country to get freedoms, a noble mission. And I think that even after we succeeded, we had to actually secure those freedoms.
To reduce it in a speech at the NRA to say you're making people think, or you're trying to say that black people to get guns, that was the reason that you're there at the NRA. That was the reason for the Civil War.
It is a fact.
That's reductive.
It's not reductive,
I think it's
Don.
Insulting. There are a whole plethora of reasons for the Civil War.
With due respect, I find your...
Don, you are getting smoked. And I know this is going off topic a wee bit, but I love watching Don Lemon get smoked. He has a lack of knowledge of his own history. And Vivek's trying to spoon feed him, but Don Lemon's getting so butthurt over these facts, he can't take it. Let's carry on.
Your explanation reductive and actually insulting, including to black Americans, to say that black people today compared to 1964, 1865 haven't made progress in part because of the freedoms we secured. And the Second Amendment was
Black
part of
people,
what secured
hang on,
that
please.
freedom.
I cannot keep a thought if you guys are talking to me in my ear. So hang on one second. So to say that black people, say what you said again.
Black people secured their freedoms after the Civil War. It is a historical fact, Don. Just study it. Only after their Second Amendment rights were secured.
They
That's
were
a
not
fact.
secured their freedoms after the Civil War. That is not, you are discounting Reconstruction. You're discounting a whole host of things that happened after the Civil War when it comes to African Americans, including the whole reason that the Civil Rights Movement happened is because black people did not secure their freedoms after the Civil War, and that things turned around. People tried to change the freedoms that were supposed to happen.
And you know how they got it?
War
They got their Second Amendment rights, and they actually got the NRA played a big role in that. But today, Don, the
NRA did not play a big role in
absolutely,
that.
they trained black Americans how to use firearms.
That's a lie. That's not. The NRA did not play a big role in that.
This is just historical fact. But
It's
Don,
not historical fact.
The part that I
Just
find
because you say it's historical fact.
The part that I find
historical
insulting is when you say today black Americans don't have those rights after we have gone through civil rights revolution in this country.
You are sitting here telling an African American about the rights and what you find insulting about the way I live, the skin I live in every day.
Here's where you and I have
the
a different
freedoms
point
that
of view.
black and white that black people don't have in this country, and that black people do have.
Well, here's where you and I have a different point of view. I think we should be able to express our views regardless of the color of our skin. We should have this debate without me regarding you as a black man,
insulting that
but
you're
me regarding you
here,
as a fellow citizen.
that you're
That's what I
sitting
think we should
here,
say.
whatever ethnicity you are explaining to me.
Whatever ethnicity I'm, I'll tell you.
That is racist. That is racist, bruh. That is stone cold racism. And that's why his butt got sacked. Now, I think Don Lemon was on this show purely because he didn't have the talent. He's on there for other reasons. You're getting cut up because you're getting absolutely schooled and destroyed by Vivek. The difference between Vivek and you, Don Lemon, is that Vivek studies these things and you're all up in your feelings and your emotions. That's why you got destroyed and that's why your butt got sacked.
It's like to be black.
Whatever
America.
ethnicity I am, I'll tell you what I am. I'm an Indian American. I'm proud of it. But I think we should have this debate. Black, white, doesn't matter.
I think we should have this
on
debate.
the content of the
if you're
ideas.
going to do it, you should do it in an honest way and in a fair way. And what you're doing is not an honest and fair way. Okay? But we appreciate you coming on.
With due respect, Don, I look forward to continuing that conversation.
We'll
Thank
continue
you.
the conversation.
Thank
you so much.
As we know, Don Lemon was no longer there. I don't even think he lasted another day. He got sacked. He had to do the walk of shame. And that video went absolutely viral and Vivek took off after that. So thank you so much, Don. Now, Nikki, that's how you handle that question. Now let's get back to see what she did.
And she did go on there, and there was no mention of the word slavery in her answer last night. Today, again, as we speak on the radio, was something a little different, seeing as Jessica Dean here with us in studio now.
In the flesh.
What's Nikki Haley saying now?
Well, so I'm just getting this in right now because, as you mentioned, she is on the radio, but she's saying, of course, the Civil War was about slavery, but then she said this. She was talking about what it means today, and she says it's about freedom and individual rights. I think we have that sound, so I'm going to let you listen to it.
Well, two things on this, Jack. I mean, of course, the Civil War was about slavery. We know that. That's the easy part of it. What I was saying was, what does it mean to us today? What it means to us today is about freedom. That's what that was all about. It was about individual freedom. It was about economic freedom. It was about individual rights. Our goal is to make sure, no, we never go back to the stain of slavery, but what's the lesson in all of that?
Okay, so doing a bit of cleanup, she also, John, said it was definitely a Democratic plant who asked this question. The voter was a Democratic plant. She says, that's why I later asked, what does it mean to you? And if you listen to the longer extended clip of that, she says, you know, what do you think? And what do you want me to say about this? Or what do you want me to say about slavery? Our reporting from my colleague in our embed there, Ebony Davis, who was filing from there, said that the voter said that they had just looked at her previous comments on this when she was running for governor of South Carolina and wanted to see if she still said the same thing. He said it was roughly the same thing. He said he was not political, but that he just wanted an answer. The overarching fact here, though, is that this is what Nikki Haley is talking about today, when her campaign wants to be talking about a million other things, but Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis are more than happy for her to be dealing with this.
Well, look, I mean, and I've covered a lot of campaigns before. The speed with which she came forward now with this clarification or cleanup or whatever you want to call it it tells you how serious the campaign thinks it is. They can't leave this out there. They decided they had to get her on the radio talking about it.
Right, immediately. And so now we have this clip. I would imagine we're going to have a clip of her on television as soon as she starts making the rounds, that she will talk to the cameras. But it's worth noting, she doesn't do a ton of what we call gaggles, but just when you're on the road and the candidates will just talk to the press. So it will be interesting to see too. Watch for that.
She does heaps. You'll remember in the debate when Vivek said she couldn't name any of the regions in the Ukraine, and she got stumped. She couldn't name any. If she just did a simple Google search, like we're going to do now, let's have a look. The common explanation is that the Civil War was fought over the moral issue of slavery. In fact, it was the economics of the slavery and the political control of that system that was central to the conflict. The key issue was states' rights. So, Nikki, you could have just done a little Google search, memorized it, and booyah, you would be in like Flynn.
What do you think this was all about? And he said, well, I'm surprised you didn't mention the word slavery. And she said this, what do you want me to say about slavery? Bakari?
Yeah, no, I'm embarrassed as a South Carolinian. I think that this is when Nikki Haley gets in trouble. And everybody who knows Nikki Haley knows that she's immensely talented when it comes to just the skill set of politics. However, she gets into this thing where she doesn't really stand for much, and she turns herself into a pretzel on very, very simple issues, simple questions. And the fact remains that she's from South Carolina. We know that when we seceded from the Union, the first line of that order of secession actually dealt with non-slave holding states having hostility towards slavery. I mean, this is like, this also frustrates me because we take history out of schools. We have probably the second or third leading candidate for the Republican primary. And this shows you the importance of history because she just fumbled it. Not only did she fumble it, but she was historically inaccurate. She was intellectually dishonest. And so for Nikki Haley to do that on one breath and then champion taking down the Confederate flag and all of these other things in South Carolina, it doesn't really match. She needs to get her story together. And her response this morning was just utterly disappointing.
And look, this is why Vivek is so transparent, right? When he's answered a question, he knows the answer because it's his answer. Whereas Nikki, she doesn't know what her answer is because she's bought and paid for. She's a neocon. The only thing she knows is where the red button is and how to fire up, the military industrial complex. That's what her policy is based around. Whatever her donors say, that's what it's all about. She doesn't know details of other things like domestic policies or anything like that. Where's the red button? Let me hit it. Here we go.
This wasn't a war about economic freedom. The economic freedom of what? The goods produced by slavery. This war wasn't about states' rights. A state's right to do what? Enslave people. I mean, so it's silly. I know she wishes she was talking about something else, but this is why she's not ready for the big limelight against somebody like Donald Trump.
Scott, I want to get your take on this because sometimes people will look at this and say, well, she's trying to kind of not say a bad thing about America and play to the base. Is that what you see happening here?
I think it was just a gaffe. I mean, I think if she had it to do over again, she would have said, of course, it was fought over slavery and moved on and continue to talk about the things that are motivating her campaign. A couple of things jump out to me about this. Number one, in New Hampshire, there's a semi-open primary. So she's really hoping a lot of independent voters come into the Republican primary and vote for her. My guess is this is not what they want to hear from her. And number two, just as a campaign tactical issue, this takes you off message and off cycle now for, probably a couple of days as she tries to clean this up. And
can't take any more of this. These networks, they're just about propaganda. They don't talk about actual policies. They don't tell you what policies Nikki Haley's got and how she differentiates herself from other candidates. No, they just want to talk about propaganda. Her propaganda, her angles, she's not pushing the right agenda. That's all this stuff's about on these propaganda channels. Let's see what else is going on.
Well, as you heard at the top, Nikki Haley eventually did acknowledge that slavery was the cause of the Civil War, not just government. And she did it over 12 hours later, mind you. She also blamed the questioner, suggesting the person was a Democratic plant. This is just a stunning state of affairs.
Wouldn't surprise me if that was Vivek planting that person there. Be a great campaign move. He should do that for the rest of the campaign.
That we're all living through right now, folks. It is about to be 2024. A candidate running for the president of the United States of America, who used to be the governor of South Carolina, where the first shot in the Civil War was fired at Fort Sumter, does not want to admit the truth about America's history in the Civil War. Governor Haley's answer was actually astonishing, that she did not mention the word slavery one time. I've seen a lot of cleanup in campaigns, presidential campaigns. I've been a part of a lot of cleanup in presidential campaigns, as I think everyone here knows. But what I saw today was, I think, equally astounding, and I think made a little bit more of a mess. What was your take on Nikki Haley's redo, if you will?
Yeah, well, listen, Nikki Haley tried to dog whistle, but the problem is we heard it. She got caught with it. That's
plainly, tried to whisper, and it was loud.
That is plainly what happened, and it says a lot about Nikki Haley, who not only is a former governor of South Carolina, she was the one who led the calls to remove a Confederate statue from the state capitol after the horrific race-based shooting in a black church. At that moment, she was able to show some leadership, but now that she is a candidate in this GOP, it is more important to her to try to dog whistle on race for fear that
I don't believe in moving statues and all this sort of stuff. It's part of history, and history needs to be talked about. And, you know, if they don't want history to be covered up and they want to talk about history, well, then it's sort of counterproductive if you want to get rid of history. You know, if these statues are there on display and someone says, hey, what's that statue all about? Well, then you can educate someone, or you can get that lesson on who that person is and where things went wrong. So completely against removal of statues and flags and all that sort of stuff. Life's tough. Get a helmet and get over it.
she may turn off some of the voters. That says a lot about Nikki Haley. It certainly says a lot about where the Republican Party stands right now. And more importantly, it shows how little she may understand voters. Listen, I've talked to Republicans in places like New Hampshire. They do not deny that racism was a part of the Civil War, was a key. Slavery was a key driving force of that. It wasn't states' rights. It was states' rights to have enslaved people.
Yes.
And so this may not play out the way she thinks it does, and it just shows how she underestimates the people of the United States. Why?
So it was over states' rights to enslave people. So how can she say it's not over states' rights?
Trying to cater to the GOP she's trying to lead.
You know, I did not have a question about the origins of the Civil War undoing Nikki Haley's rocket to second place in the polls a couple weeks before Iowa. Yeah, here we are. Molly, if we look back at Nikki Haley's history, as Kim just noted, this isn't the first time she's said something like this. The Hill reports that as she ran for governor in 2010, that in an interview with a now defunct activist group, then known as Palmetto Patriots, she described the war as between two disparate sides fighting for tradition and change, and said the Confederate flag was not something that is racist. So one could argue that we shouldn't have been surprised, but we've also heard a lot from Nikki Haley since then. What's your take?
I mean, look, moral clarity, right? We need moral clarity from our leaders. We need people to say things like, this is an obvious answer.
Well, then Vivek's given you moral clarity. He's given you moral clarity, purpose, and meaning. He's bringing you policies that are bringing people together. I don't know how much more
obvious answer is slavery was the cause of the Civil War. It is wrong. Just like with the college presidents, like, it's okay to say moral things. You know what I mean? I feel like there's so much with Nikki Haley of her trying to sort of have it both ways, appeal to that very base section of the GOP base that believes in the things Republicans always pretended not to believe in, right? The stuff that is the third rail of American politics, the stuff that is so deplorable. And she wants those voters. And so she refuses to take the moral, the moral right moment and say what is righteous, which is that obviously with slavery, obviously slavery is wrong. Obviously the Confederates are the bad guys. I mean, this is not rocket science, but we have a Republican Party that is not operating on Earth One. And so they cannot say these moral things that they need to be saying in order for us to have, a moral democracy, a multiracial moral democracy, which
it's not the Republican party, and I'm not, a Republican chair squad member or anything like that. Her views are completely different to Vivek Ramaswamy's, and even Ron DeSantis, and even Trump. Her views are quite different. I believe that Trump, Vivek, and DeSantis, I don't think they really want war. Now, I think two of them, Vivek and Trump, can definitely avoid war because I think they have the skills, the knowledge, and the focus to avoid war. Whereas I think Ron may be influenced by his big donors. Nikki, she's bought and paid for 100%. So no, I don't think you can throw all Republicans in the one basket because just those four candidates I mentioned, they are quite different. The one that offers the most moral clarity and purpose and meaning by far is Vivek Ramaswamy. Hands down, and no one's second on that. Now, who's probably going to win is probably going to be Trump, but I'm sure they're going to find a position for Vivek, and it's probably going to be like AG, which is probably right down his alley. He'll be able to clean up the swamp, and Trump will be able to go about his business. And they're definitely going to need someone as press secretary, someone that can articulate themselves and that can handle the propaganda media.
Should be the goal.
When I worked for President Biden, he used to always say that America is always in search of a more perfect union. And throughout history, we have taken steps to become a more perfect union. And that.
Yeah. That's why he had people out on the front lawn of the White House, flashing their you-know-whats. He's running that place like a brothel, honestly.
That fight still wages on. And when you think about it, Nikki Haley was the governor of South Carolina when the 2015 shooting happened at Emmanuel AME Church, right? When a racist young man walked into a church and gunned down members of a church, including the pastor, during Bible study. Okay, so that led to the taking down of the Confederate flag from the South Carolina State House after many calls for it. And this is what she said at the time. I want to play this for folks.
In South Carolina, we honor tradition, we honor history, we honor heritage, but there's a place for that flag, and that flag needs to be in a museum where we will continue to make sure that people can honor it appropriately. But the State House that's an area that belongs to everyone, and no one should ever drive by the State House and feel pain. No one should ever drive by the State House and feel like they don't belong. And so I think this is a hopeful day for South Carolina.
Eddie, obviously, Nikki Haley knows better. Where does this quest for a more perfect union leave us when the current state of the Republican Party is that
Come on, Eddie, make this make sense,
are afraid to say the Civil War was about slavery?
Well, I think we have to confront, the reality that always haunts this fragile experiment in democracy, and that is that some people, Simone, actually believe the claims that she's put forward. I mean, what we heard out of Nikki Haley's mouth was not just simply a kind of political pandering. Kim was right to call it a dog whistle. Molly's right to say she failed on the moral test, but she actually mimicked, the lost cause historiography. And the lost cause, what it tried to do as it tried to redeem the South, right, minimize slavery and accented states' rights. And so what you get is this rewriting of American history right after Reconstruction, right? As the efforts of the Civil War collapses, you see people writing the story of the nation in such a way that in some ways absolves the South of its moral crimes in some ways. And so what Nikki Haley is doing, even in her redo, even in her cleanup on aisle 12, she invoked the basic narrative strategy of the lost cause, Simone. And so how do we address, this quest for a more perfect union? Tell the truth about some of us actually holding the view that this country ought to be and must remain, ironically, coming out of the mouth of Nikki Haley, a white nation in the vein of old Europe.
Bruh, have a look at your panel. 75% black. What are you talking about, bro? think that's enough. I think that's enough. These propaganda networks, they just can't leave it alone, can they? We all know slavery was terrible, okay? And it's never going to go back to what the transatlantic slave trade was like. It's never ever going to go back to that. But having said that, the world now has more slaves than it ever did. But you don't see people jumping up and down every single day on the news. I don't think there is one person on the planet that is going to say that the slave trade was a fantastic thing. Everyone agrees unanimously that it wasn't. And if you keep looking back, how is that going to help you in the future? Well, we can see before our own eyes that it doesn't help. And every time the government thinks they can throw money at these problems without actually getting to the issues of the problems, and a lot of the issues of problems, people that are disenfranchised, is the family. It all starts at home. When a baby is born, you need two parents in the house, preferably married, and committed to providing that child with a good platform for them to grow and flourish. We need to stop incentivizing single mother households. The outcomes are horrendous and horrific, and throwing money in that direction only makes people more lazy and have less drive. But anyway, this was more about Nikki Haley and her failings. She's exposed herself again. Now, she's done it 3 or 4 times, okay? She knows nothing about the Ukraine except for where the red button is, all right, and where the ATM is. Let's keep pulling out that mullah. And here she's exposed herself again. Now, she probably knows, about the Civil War and what it was fought over and all that sort of thing, but she doesn't want to upset her donors. And you can see she's trying to balance everything. Whereas Vivek, he's going to tell you straight because he's speaking for himself and on behalf of himself. And there's a clear difference. He does have a moral compass. He does have a strategy for most problems. And anything I've heard him talk on, he has quite a deep understanding of it. Why don't you let me know your thoughts? Leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. What do you think of Nikki? How does she compare to Vivek, Trump, and DeSantis? Has she exposed herself? Now I'm about to dip, but before I go, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and help us get to the 100 subs mark. I would really appreciate that, and I will see you in the next video.